Hey guys, Dr. Sandal here. Nice as always to see y'all. Today I'm talking about mold toxicity with my friend Neela Iskandrani with Pure Maintenance of Kansas. One of the things that is very, very true of mold toxicity, and we're going to talk a lot about what that is today, is that treating it is really quite a hassle. And having people who have good technology to remediate the home is a huge part of any treatment protocol that I recommend for my patients. And Nez's company, Pure Maintenance of Kansas, has some really, really cool tech around that. So, Nez, I want to talk a little bit about what is mold, what can people do about this, and then I know you've brought some kind of cool props and stuff to showcase a little bit of what your guys' process is, and it's unique.
Absolutely. So, we specialize in indoor environments. Microbial growth is the big guy, right? But bacteria, whenever there's water damage, there's a handful of bacteria. But absolutely mold. And mold is a fungi, if you don't know that. I gave the gist last time about me being the fun gal. So, but yeah, that's what we do. That's our specialty. We go into the home. We kind of get a good background on the home itself, the history of the home, and kind of the individual as well to an extent. And then we kind of go through from top to bottom on their home and kind of just look at all the different things that could be problematic, some things that could be preventative, such as like the downspout, getting it away from the foundation, and then just some preventative stuff as well as, hey, this is a little too far gone. We got to pay a little bit more attention to this.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, let's get into all the process of this, because I'm sure people are very, very curious on what you guys do that's unique. And that's one of the reasons I'm really excited to have you on the show, because we need good solutions to this problem. And so I'd like to first step back and kind of talk about what the problem is, talk about mold illness, talk about some of the first thing I'd like to say is that a lot of people don't believe it's a real thing. I talk to patients all the time who are verifiably test positive, proven ill because of mold, who are getting exposed to it at their bosses or their school or their whatever.
Right.
And no one wants to take them seriously.
Right. No, yeah, absolutely. It's like a thing that some doctors don't even look into it, let alone
doctors don't look into it.
Yeah. They don't even study at medical school is what I've been told.
No. The difficulty is that a lot of the testing that's used to look for mold toxicity is outside the scope of most MDs.
Right.
If you talk to even infectious disease doctors, who might be the people who think about mold coming into your body, maybe they're the nearest specialist, they're going to look at you funny. They're going, it's not a real thing. It's not taught in medical school. Now, they might think, is there literally mold growing in your lungs? That then becomes their domain. But most mold toxicity, thank God, isn't that. It's not that dire. Right. It's rather that there's mold in the home environment that produces this mycotoxins, these defenses from the fungi that are evolved to fight off bacteria and other things that might try and munch the fungus.
Right.
But it happens to be that they're really, really hard on human health. So it's not that people are infected with these. So it falls outside the realm of infectious disease. It's kind of like it falls outside of the realm of any particular specialist into the edges. It gets lost in the cracks.
You can't pinpoint it, but it could be dormant. So I see what you're saying there. But to answer your original question, so it's actually kind of funny that you bring that up, because there's a client, and I feel bad for this client, to be completely honest. They had to spend well over almost $40,000 on their home with traditional remediation, just doing all the things.
Trying to clean out mold.
Yeah, all the things that the IRCRC guidelines tells you to do. They've hit every pinpoint, they've almost gone overboard on some things as far as encapsulation and stuff goes within their home. So it looks, to the human eye, it looks perfect. So, I tried to, and we were there, I sat there on his couch and I kind of tried to talk to him, hey, this is a problem that we're not visually seeing. And just getting that past his, mind was really, really hard. And I think it is for most people, right? You don't see it. So that correlation with an issue isn't You see what I'm saying?
Totally.
So.
Well, and it's tricky too. I think one of the reasons that people don't appreciate mold toxicity is that it affects people differently. There's a lot of genetic variance in how vulnerable people are. So you get two people in the same building, and one of them is horribly ill with mycotoxins, and the other is perfectly fine.
Right.
And it kind of goes to that same sort of thing. We live in a culture where seeing is believing. And it's like, well, I don't see fuzzy black mold on my wall, so I must not have mold. But of course, mycotoxins are microscopic. And so you might have it behind the drywall, coming up into the venting, and then floating throughout. I oftentimes say that fixing mold, if someone thinks they have mold, they should go to a physician who knows how to work with mold. They should get tested to prove or disprove that, so we can be scientific and you make sure that you're not wasting your money and your time. But at the point that you have established mold toxicity, you then get to a point where it's kind of crazy making. How do I get rid of this stuff?
Yeah.
And working with a good physician, we'll talk about how do we upregulate your detox pathways, how do we use the right binders for your body, all those sort of good things to try and support you through it, but you absolutely must get it out of your environment.
Yeah.
And this is where people,
coming back.
And this is where people start to pull out their hair, because there are very few services that will give people the straight shoot on what to do about this.
Oh, for sure.
Like you were saying, the story of someone spending $40,000 trying to solve this problem. I'm like you. I wish they would have come and seen me. To be like, okay, there's a better way to do this. Like, hang on.
Right.
It's hard because a lot of the traditional methodologies for clearing mold are purely destructive. Let's start tearing away wall and get down, even break things down to the studs.
Right.
So we can solve this problem.
And there's a time and a place for that, right? So if we have a super toxigenic mold and it's just eating away at your drywall, like we want that taken care of, right? And I get in trouble all the time for saying demolition-free mold remediation. It's if there's stachybotrys on your drywall and we've done a tape test, we've done a thorough analysis on the affected area itself, and we know it's airborne, we've got to get rid of that piece of drywall. We can't just fumigate and leave that piece of drywall there. I mean, sure, it's going to be denatured, but it's too far into that cavity, and it's just, it needs to be gone. Yeah. Not only aesthetically, but it needs to be gone.
Yeah, I like the way you talk about this. I think it's important for people to understand that, like there are variations in the quality of physicians,
right,
there are also variations in the quality of mold remediators.
Yeah. And
you think about this in a very thorough fashion, and that's super important because clearing mold out of our environment really can make people go bananas. It's super frustrating to do the DIY. And it's possible you can get a lot of improvement with that. But if you really want to get it gone, you need someone who thinks about it properly.
And so also, I should say the CDC says that if you have mold and it's not if it's not a target mold, so if it's not a quote unquote black mold, stachybotrys, Chaetomium, Fusarium, if it's not one of those and it's less than 10 square feet, then you can take care of it yourself, but you've got to have a consultant and you've got to do it the proper way.
I'm imagining 10 square feet of stachybotrys.
Yeah, don't do
God.
that. Yeah.
And again, some people can lick that wall and they're fine.
Right.
Some people have genetics for that, but there are other people who look at that and fall really, really ill.
And that's what makes it challenging.
There's a lot of chronic illness from mold toxicity. And one thing that I like to add to people's discussion, I'm sure if you're watching this video, you're interested in mold toxicity, you've heard of it. One of the things that's really, I think, under-discussed is that mold is part of the problem. Mold can be 99% of your problem, or it can be 5% of your problem, but it is a chronic drain on human health. It pulls your homeostasis in the wrong direction.
Right.
It's pro-aging. It is a toxin. Exactly right. And when we think about integrative medicine, functional medicine, longevity medicine, high-end medicine like we do here at Atma Clinic, we want to get rid of any inflammatory agents. We want to really take a fine-tooth comb and look for all that stuff. And I am constantly, here in Lawrence, Kansas, seeing people who didn't realize they had water damage, and it was the cause for their brain fog or their chronic fatigue or contributory to their autoimmune disease. I see that absolutely all the time. And when we come around to the point of saying, okay, let's solve this problem, we've determined it, then we really do want to be technical about how we solve that. And you're right, going to an expert saves people an enormous amount of stress. And you guys have tools that are awesome, way outside of what you can DIY.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the thing too, a lot of people will always ask me, they'll get on the phone with me and they'll be like, can we do that test? Can I buy one on Amazon and put it in a little petri dish? And like, sure you can, but what are you going to do with it afterwards? Are you going to, you don't really have a lab to send it off to tell you it's X amount of molds per cubic meter, and it's and then also with that information, once you do figure out what type of mold you have and how much you have, what are you going to do with that? So, there's definitely a fine line where you've got to seek the correct professional. You've got to seek the right remediator.
One of the things that I really liked when you guys came to town is that even compared to a DIY approach, people will often save money doing your guys' approach.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And it's just because you guys have a better technology. You don't have to just tear everything out and rebuild everything. You guys have a way to kind of get into all of the unseen places in a thorough fashion. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what your guys' process is. Yeah. People who haven't heard it before, tell me what's innovative about it, and also what's new for you guys as a business. What are you guys leaning into, and where are you guys growing?
Yeah, great question. So as far as the inspection portion, so it's really important. I always tell everyone on my team, the groundwork is really in the inspection. It really is. If you don't have a good inspection, if you can't figure out, every little area that's given them a hard time, you're not going to be able to thoroughly figure out the remediation. The remediation's easy. It really is. And I say that because if we were to go into the inspection and we don't account for a wall that had 90% moisture, then they're gonna come back with that issue later on. We didn't do our job right. So it's really, really important that we have a very thorough inspection. That is, I can't emphasize it enough.
I love it. Measure twice, cut once. Same thing in medicine. Yes. That's just smart. Yeah.
Exactly. And then as far as something new with our company, we're growing really, really quickly. So since January, we've done about 7 different commercial jobs, and we're getting to almost 10 by the end of November at least. And then we've done over 100, or not, those customers, 144 customers. So we've done about 78. We've remediated 78 homes.
Congrats. Good. Yeah. Lawrence is notorious for having watery intrusion, a lot of limestone basements. What is unique here in Lawrence to you guys? I know Pure Maintenance is a national chain, but you brought that here to Lawrence.
Yeah.
Tell me about what your experience is going in and checking out people's houses.
Structurally.
Structurally, and what's unique here.
So all of the different, like Arkansas, Indiana, all those roads down in East Lawrence, the limestone basements are notorious. So most definitely we have to do a good, thorough analysis, not only in the basement, but what's been affected over the years. Because usually those homes, we figured out 1890s, early 1900s, that's when they were built. So we have really figured out a protocol, for those homes in particular. Awesome. And then as far as other homes, I don't know what some builders were thinking, but
sometimes you wonder.
Yeah, and half of the crawl space is also finished basement, and I'm like, what? Obviously they didn't have their health in mind when they were building these homes. Right.
A lot of people are just oblivious to that. They're like, they're not connected. My house doesn't make me sick or healthy.
Yeah, they still don't have that correlation now. They really don't. I talked to a lot of different builders, structural engineers and stuff of that sort. It's really hard to wrap their heads around that still, which is frustrating.
And when we're thinking about optimal health, we spend so much time in our home. I mean, even mold aside, mold should be a no-brainer. Water damage should be a no-brainer. Build a house that doesn't have those things. But we also think about things like volatile organic chemicals, these VOCs.
Yeah.
And a lot of new construction just is totally, it stinks. You're like, man, there are so many VOCs off-gassing in here.
Gosh, I'm forming a headache as we speak.
and yeah, it's the same thing. Like some people are immune and other people are really sensitive. And there's a lot of overlap with mold illness.
Right.
So if you're chemical sensitive, there's a decent likelihood that mold is part of that.
Yeah.
Again, 5%, 60%, I don't know. But you would think that enough people notice irritation in their home environment that builders start to catch on and think about this. And I mean, there are some bespoke brands that are selling like low VOC paint, but even times those are really full of VOCs. Like
they smell a little bit different.
Right.
Who knows what's in it?
It's like when they got rid of BPA in can lining. Like, what would you replace it with? They're like, BPB. Like, well, we can say we're BPA free. Like, you're killing me here. Yeah. So we as a society have a lot to grow around as far as thinking ahead. People like you and I, we can help people remediate.
Right.
But I'd love it if we lived in a place where that wasn't necessary. Like,
right.
An idea, like when I say live in a place, I mean like mentally, people are like, oh, how do we build great homes that don't make people sick?
Right.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even like when you're in the process of building a home, and it's like those studs, like, I see it all the time because, I mean, we have, especially this season, it's pretty rainy this season. And like those studs are getting affected because it's raining, and then it's like, and some of it's like, how do you prevent that? Like, do you put a huge tarp over your home and stuff of that sort in the middle of the build? It's tough. So it's like, not to say like these builders don't know what the heck they're doing, but a lot of it's really hard. I mean, preventative wise.
Right. You're exactly right. I see those old homes or new homes that are getting built.
Right.
And you're like, yeah, that wood is getting soaked in with water. God, I don't know.
Yeah. No kidding. Yeah, and then, I mean, it's really, really hard. No matter how great you are maintenance-wise in your home, you're going to have a leaky dishwasher. You're going to have a leaky, your drain's going to leak. I mean, there's going to be circumstances.
I had a hose freeze this last winter, and it's on an external spigot.
Okay.
And we literally didn't realize it for months. And it wasn't like leaking horribly, but every time the kids went to play outside and turn on the hose, it was just water fall down the wall, and we just didn't notice it till way later. And I'm like, oh. Like crazy making, it's like chasing all this down is hard.
It is, most definitely. Yeah, and it's not like you're outside walking around looking at that all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you then think about that sort of scenario? I mean, everybody's home is going to have some periodic water damage. At what point should they call you guys for professional inspection and potentially remediation?
Right.
Versus when is it appropriate for people just to look at that themselves? What's your advice?
So actually, we just sent out a little email deal where it was like, check your crawl space every season. The season changes. And then as far as make sure your HVAC is up to, you're maintaining it properly and time and place and stuff. But I think if I could give any tip, it would be make sure that you are aware. Like if you have nose blindness is very much so a thing for homeowners. It just is. You're used to the smell of your home. But it's just, if you're walking in a certain room and you're like, oh, I haven't, some people have really big houses and they're like, I haven't been in that room for 6 months. I'm like, make it a thing to do your rounds in the home. There are certain things that you could do as a homeowner. But I mean, I think if you are sensitive, then that's a different thing. Maybe call us out for an annual inspection or even a biannual inspection. I think that is probably necessary for some individuals.
One of the things I really like to advise my patients on is to trust their nose. And you're right, nose blindness is a thing for sure. I just came back from traveling for a conference. And I came back to my home and I was like, okay, cool. I haven't been in my house for 5 days. Let me smell around, right? Because that nose blindness goes away with a little bit of a break. So especially if you're coming back from a vacation, when you go to your home, go in all the rooms and sniff, this is a little funny, and trust that. And especially if you're in your home, but you smell all the time and suddenly it smells different, Yeah.
There's a reason.
Yeah, especially if there's mustiness. Mustiness is a dead ringer for there being some mold growth in your home.
Yeah.
They could be clothing that you haven't worn for a while. You could be, I was talking to a patient recently who was in a particular theatrical performance, and they were putting on a costume, and the costume just smelled musty to them. I'm like, hey, that's worrisome. Like, your body is giving you that signal for a reason. And one of the things that I think is really common is people ask someone else, they're like, hey, does it smell musty to you?
Yeah.
And the other person's like, nah. And the other person's like, okay, I must be imagining it. But the reality is that our body gives us signals if it's important to us.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't give us signals if it's not important to us. So if one person is sensitive to mold, they'll smell it.
Right.
And if another person is genetically immune to mold, and that those lucky people exist, they're never going to smell it. And so people kind of have this sense of like, well, mold toxicity or mold illness doesn't exist because I can't smell it. Like, well, I'm jealous. You're immune to it. That's great. It happens. There's genetic gifts.
Right.
But for people who smell the mustiness, respect it.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
You got to figure out where it is. If you can't figure it out yourself, call Nez, have her team come and look around. But it's very, very important for your health. If stuff smells musty, that is damaging. That's bad news. I'm really picky about that.
Right. No, yeah, as you should be. And then there's also some that don't smell. They don't have an off gas and they don't smell it. That's why it's just, mold is a tricky thing. And that's why we have a bunch of instruments. So I'm just going to showcase a couple of these really quick. And these are just a couple, right? So if there's a certain circumstance or there's a certain going into a home and I know they have, plaster or something of that sort, I'll bring some of my more heavy duty stuff. But here's a thermal camera. So this bad boy helps us see what we can't see.
Does that help you see behind drywall?
Yes.
There's heat activity behind?
Yep.
That's awesome.
And it can be tough because if that's the same temperature as it is out here, so it can be kind of difficult to see sometimes. And so that brings us to the borescope. So this bad boy, and this is kind of difficult because some homeowners, they don't mind us doing a little screwdriver size, hole in their drywall, where it's like if you're renting or, you're just in the process of buying a home, so you haven't even bought it. We can't be too intrusive, right? But a lot of the time, this will help us see under a fridge or in between a cavity where else, you normally couldn't.
So that is a video camera on that hose, huh?
Yes, correct.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you just punch a little hole in the drywall, feed it back, and turn it back around and look.
Yep. This guy.
Is it remote control driven? How do you turn that back around to look back at the drywall once you punch it in?
Yeah, so you kind of got to maneuver it with your hand a little bit like this, and then you just hand-eye correlation. So you're here and you're looking at it and you're like, okay, let's look over here. So it's not the fanciest of things, but it gets the job done, right? Yeah. There was a guy at Home Depot and he was like, I don't want to go into my crawl space or something. I was like, get one of those, look at it or call me. But yeah, I think they are pretty handy. And then we have a moisture meter that I didn't grab out, but pretty much it tells you what percent of moisture is within the cavity. You could buy one of those off Amazon, so that's pretty nice.
So you kind of chuck it behind the drywall or into a crawl space and it'll give you a humidity percentage?
Correct. So anything over 15-16% is worrisome, I would say. It really depends on, if this piece of drywall was affected, let's say 30 days ago, and we put some fans on it or whatever, it may be at 40% or something like that. Okay. Regardless, it needs to be cut out, but at least gives me an indicator maybe on time when it happened and stuff of that sort if we don't know. So, yeah.
So let's say that someone has a small area. They have a dishwasher leak. Okay. And there's some, let's say it gets to the subfloor or something, and a lot of those washing machines, they're kind of rolled out over subfloor. Yes. It's a little open, right? So you kind of have studs or baseboards below. Right. What do you think about DIY approaches like concrobium for teeny spots? What's your experience with that?
Yeah, so technically, that would be categorized as water 2, water loss. So if it's hitting like a dirty water, and also you want to know what type of floor it is. There's a lot of moving factors to it. But if it's gotten to the point where it's been not even 10 minutes, you notice it, there's standing water. First of all, turn off your AC. Okay, don't have anything moving.
No air circulation. Yeah.
Try to contain that area. Wear proper PPE, gloves, mask, and then dry it out as much as possible. I mean, some of this is overkill, right? But if there's a sensitized individual, it's better to go above and beyond.
Yeah.
Dry it out thoroughly. Make sure you have fans going. Make sure it's like completely dried out. Even have it going overnight into the next day. Stuff like that. Yeah. If you come back the second, third, fourth day and there's a smell, then let's talk. Then something didn't get dried out properly. Maybe you missed somewhere. We have actually a situation where they thought they dried everything out. The water leaked into a floor vent and it got into the ductwork.
Crap.
Yeah, so that one's a different situation.
Water will flow along any plane. And so sometimes there'll even be, you'll have a subfloor and you'll have like a vinyl overlay or something. The water can wick under there.
Oh, absolutely.
A long distance.
Right. I've even seen a dishwasher fall through. I'm not, it's bad.
It just like rotted out the floor and just.
It was like they were an older couple and they they spent a lot of time in their living room and their bedroom, and who knows how long that had happened, and it literally plummeted into their basement.
Oh, that's scary.
Yeah.
So when you see something like that, obviously there's some deconstruction, reconstruction, a little bit that has to happen. You guys have, to my knowledge, kind of a primary approach, which is using this peracetic acid fog. Correct. Which is just, it hits everything with a pressurized instrument that just pushes that into all of the
nooks and
porous nooks and crannies. When you look at something like where that dishwasher has fallen through.
Right.
Okay, you guys are going to do that just to try and treat the whole home because God knows how long that's been going on and there's probably spread. But what do you do for that local area? Is there some other therapies that you guys use to try and clean that up specifically, since that was ground zero?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. You want to get to that root cause. So DOT is what we use. It's a DOT. And it's a very green, everything's EPA safe, registered. We're very big on that, so we're not going to use Superstratum or those other ones on the market that who knows what's in them. They won't even disclose.
It's super important for those sensitized individuals.
Yeah,
my patients always appreciate that because they're already going to be set up for chemical sensitivities. So God forbid we treat with something that's going to make them more ill. That's a disaster, right?
Oh, yeah. So what we use is DOT, and it's a stain remover. And so we're addressing that area, and then we fumigate after the dry out everything, that whole stitch, pulling up the subfloor if need to be. And then we stain remove it, then we fog it, and then we apply the antimicrobial so it doesn't come back.
Cool.
And you brought up with yes, we're going to fog the whole home. The thing is, too, is some people are like, why do you have to fog the whole home? It was just in this area. So if I could touch on that a little bit.
Please.
So, and this is something that's really, really hard to get people to understand, wrap their heads around as well. It's like, this was the problem. Why do we have to address the basement? Why do we have to address the upstairs? A lot of the times, microbial growth can start happening within 48, sometimes even 24, 48, 72 hours, okay? On top of that, if you had like a pristine home and you dried it out to this extent, mold probably wants to go, won't even want to live there because it doesn't have a long enough moisture source, which is so
key.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you need water or oxygen and water. So the thing is, if you have a pristine home, it's not going to live as long or at all. So the thing is, if there is a occurrence and it starts to go like crazy, it's because that mold's already in the home. And it's just all migrating there. And then
It just found the moisture.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and it's showcasing itself right there. Like, this is the millions and millions and millions of colonies that have been living in your 40-year-old home for 40 years. And then on top of that, it's going through your vent system. It's circulating everywhere. I always give the analogy with cooking bacon in your kitchen. You start to smell it all the way in the basement. That's the same airways that mold spores are lingering through. So it's all in conjunction.
All interconnected.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely one of the big limitations with the breakdown deconstructive approach.
Right.
It's like, oh, we've got a big patch of black mold there. Conventionally, okay, pull that down and pull down a radius around it. 2 feet. That's the typical recommendation, which is like, okay, sure, but hasn't it spread? And the answer is, well, yeah, obviously. You're right with the bacon smell, right? Like, if your entire home should be connected. Yeah. So yeah, that's very, very tricky. And so someone who just has the constructive and deconstructive approach, they're probably going to start to smell that mold again at some point, especially if they have some water intrusion. And it just takes a little bit, and all of a sudden it's...
Exactly.
Mold's hungry. It's vicious. It wants to live.
Yep, it really does.
It's like a bad old horror movie.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. It just gets worse over time. Bacterium viruses, they tend to die within a couple days. Mold is just that dang thing that just wants to live, and it's gonna keep living as long as there's oxygen and moisture source.
Yeah. Which we need as well, so we're at an impasse. Right?
Yeah, right. No kidding. Yeah.
Well, cool. Nez, thank you so much for sharing with us. I'm sure a lot of people were really, really fascinated by this. If you guys have any questions for Nez or for myself on how we treat homes or how we treat human bodies around mold, please let us know in the comments, and let us know what else you guys would like to hear. We'll see you next time. Thank you very much, Nez, for joining me.